Hi, and welcome to another episode of Nursing Your Way to Wealth, where a mental health nurse and an accountant talk about wealth creation, personal development, and financial independence in the UK to help you live the life you deserve.
Hi, everybody, and hi, Alex. Welcome back. This is episode 56, which is mad, and an episode where we, I guess, kind of confront some of the rebuttals of why following financial independence is could be a good or bad idea. And I think from the reason we come out this episode, we've done this for 56 episodes now. We've talked a lot about the merits of buy. Um, you probably have been speaking to friends and family about it, but probably to mixed reaction. Certainly, is if my experience is anything to go by, often with things such as "oh, life's too short," or "I'll never be able to retire," or "oh, my house is my retirement," or "the government will take care of me," or "you can't retire until you're 65." All sorts of rebuttals to do anything but engage with the concept of financial independence. And so that's kind of one of the main topic for today. There's also a couple of other bits. So Alex is going to talk a bit about a monopoly study, which is quite interesting, and we'll cover reasonable or ridiculous. So I have no idea what this is going to be. So this is Alex's gambit of whether something is reasonable or ridiculous, and then we'll just summarize at the end. So a quick half an hour tour around our financial independence and some interesting facts. So yes, Alex, welcome.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. And another super intro. Yeah, first up, the Monopoly study, if you've ever heard of it, it's run by a guy called Paul Piff out of a US university. I think it's Berkeley or similar to that. He's studied whether having money makes you mean or meaner than people who don't. So he set up a rigged game of Monopoly, like the classic kind of board game, um, and to see whether advantages given to certain players made them change how they played the game and how they felt afterwards. So he got a random number of players together, flipped a coin to decide whether you would start in a rich position or a poor position. So it's a totally random kind of thing. There's no kind of secret around that. But the people in the poor position just played the game as you normally would. You get the normal amount of money, etc. Off you go. The people in the rich position got twice as much money to start off with as the people in the poor position, and I think there was an extra advantage about being able to roll the dice more times than the other people. And by the time they got to the end of the game and they got a little feedback and they'd kind of finished it, the rich people attributed their success to their own skill set and not the fortune of landing on the right side of the coin flip. So they would say things like, "Of course I won. I'm skillful at this," or "I'm very intelligent, so of course I won." And it's basically whether you're given additional advantages in life. So if we think about a lot of people in tech, they say things like you need to fail 7, 8 times in order to create a successful business, and that's just how it goes. But people who have these safety nets and they have this additional money that they can use is that they don't have the fear of like going totally broke and losing their house and their home, etc. Whereas if you have someone who doesn't have any of that and they might have one chance with a small amount of money to start a business, that's a very different prospect to someone who's been funded really, really healthily and they don't have to worry about really the fundamentals of Maslow's hierarchy. I think it just means it puts people just not on the same playing field when people very I can't remember the word for it, but in a way that kind of downplays all of the advantages they've had in life and just put it down to like being self-made or skill. Whereas actually, it's a lot more nuanced than that. There are so many factors, yeah, taken into account. But yeah, Alex, have you ever heard of the Monopoly study by Paul Piff or no?
I haven't actually, but it's very, yeah, it's an interesting study, and I guess you can see some of it in real life, can't you? Some of those characteristics. And I think, like you mentioned about having if you start off with a big base or a strong capital base, your risk profile changes completely. And because of that, you're then able to actually, if you have more, as you say, more capital behind you versus somebody that doesn't have as much, and then you're risking the same amount, say, I don't know, $50,000 or something, the person who's got 1 million, that is insignificant to that person with the million, whether or not something plays out. You can afford to take that risk. Whereas if you've only got 50,000, there's a very different set of circumstances and very different risk, not just financial risk, but almost life risk as well. And I think it allows, if you can start with that bigger base, you can take more risk, and therefore there's more chance of things turning out better. So therefore you can, which then compounds and grows. And I guess that's kind of what we're seeing with more, I guess, the levels of inequality across society generally is, most people at the top have got the assets and the asset base from which to gamble, or not, gamble's the wrong word, to invest and speculate and start businesses or invest in businesses that may or may not fail. And then that, if they are successful, that's more money. It continues to grow, and then the gap gets even bigger.
Hmm. You've just described basically venture capital, haven't you? So that they'll take 10 punts on companies. They only need one of them to turn out well. Like if one of them does 100x or something, that will cover the other nine that they've just not wasted, but they've lost all their money for it. And if you have all of that money to begin with, it's a bit like a dice rolling game that you can play, isn't it? Whereas if someone doesn't have it, then they're not even at the table. They don't even have any dice.
Yeah, and I think you often hear that, early investors in, um, like Airbnb or eBay or
Yeah,
Tesla
Monster
or almost,
Energy.
yeah, well, and that isn't somebody's, that's not that person's single nest egg that has gone into that company. It's usually, um, they've invested, they'll have 100 other investments, and this is just one of them that's just turned out spectacularly well. Um, but yeah,
Yeah. And you can then afford to take the loss on the other companies, can't
yeah,
you? Because your basic needs, your basic lifestyle is accounted for by other
yeah,
means. You're not kind of going to a casino with your last £500 and just sticking it on red.
exactly. Yeah, so it completely
Yeah.
alters.
Very, very different circumstances. Yeah, huge. Okay, so that's a little intro on something we read this week that we found interesting. So into kind of the main body of the show. So we've written the title is just kind of why bother. So Alex, I think you and I might have some slightly different reasons for this, but if I were to ask you just to explain, like in a couple of sentences, why you're bothering to put in all this effort and this work, what would you say?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So I think, and one which comes up quite a bit, and I think what the thing for me, which I value more than anything, is, I guess it's freedom and control, and that's freedom of my own time, freedom to do what I want to do, and control over my life. So I can decide what I want to do when I want to do it, and that that is the crux of is that kind of my main reason. And what that isn't is, you know, meaning that I will quit work and never work again because work is awful, and I will, you know, want to spend the rest of my life on a beach. It's still, I will continue probably, but working on my terms, and that could be. I, I guess it's partly that, but partly I just don't want to be one of these people that is chained to a desk because I have to, because of the financial decisions I've made, and to have, all my money going on a crazy big mortgage. I've got cars, I've got liabilities left, right, and center. I want the peace of mind and clarity that I don't have any payments going out, and I've got a portfolio that's going to support me. And I can then, that almost bit of fortress will allow me to do exactly what I want to do, whether that's traveling for 6 months of the year, whether that's being at home watching the telly, whether that's working crazy hours if I want to be doing on a business venture. But the point for me is it's my choice, and I haven't put myself into a situation where a lot of people just sleepwalk into a situation where they have a huge mortgage that they're going to pay off when they're 65 and they'll just be in time for their retirement. Like, absolutely not for me. Um, there are trade-offs and there are sacrifices, but I feel the longer term view of having the my time is my own is more powerful than any product or anything else that I can think of. So that for me is why I'm pursuing it. And that there's people I speak to often find it a little bit strange, a little bit weird, why you would be different and not just follow the same path. And why not buy a house that's worth £1 million? It's because the bank will lend you that money. It like can't people can't seem to comprehend some of that. Um, but yeah, I'm so control, freedom, do what I want to do with my time, whatever that may be, is my reasoning. But yeah, how about you?
Similar, to be honest with you. Just some of the reasoning for me is slightly different, and it's interesting that you say your example of speaking to someone the other day about why wouldn't you buy £1 million house just because the bank will lend you it. It's the same thing of like, if someone next to you jumped off a cliff, would you jump? Well, absolutely not. Oh, okay. I wouldn't go anywhere near the edge of a cliff, perhaps, because I'm in that way risk averse. But with the stock markets, not risk averse. But I feel like t- time is the only thing that you can't buy. You can't get it back in a particular way. Once you've kind of spent it, you've spent it. So, Alex, you and I now at 7:05 on the 5th of March 2025, we are like the youngest we'll ever be. Like tomorrow we'll be older, next week we'll be older when we sit down again and record something. So right now you're as young as you'll ever be, and no amount of money will get you any of that time back. So on the side of the equation of trading your money for time is what I would rather be doing than like most people do, and they trade their time for money in the form of employment. I'd rather spend or invest some of that money to be able to get time back. And for me, I'd only want to be on one side of that equation. Like, I don't want to, as you say, sleepwalk into retirement and be like, oh my God, I'm 65 now. What am I doing? What does life mean? What does all these things do? Am I going to pay my mortgage off and then go into retirement? And then the next thing for me is to, like, you start really thinking about your own mortality. And what I don't want to do is get to that stage and look back and think, oh, actually, I wish I'd lived totally differently. I'd rather regret retiring at 40 and going on amazing adventures, but I'd never think I will. I don't think I'll ever want to have worked more hours in the day than perhaps I need to. And there's another kind of thing here about, like you say, the control of pressure, like within the mind. If you take all of these liabilities on, and by liabilities we mean like huge mortgages, bank loans, car loans, anything else that means you're spending money that you've not earned yet, that puts a lot of pressure on you to a continue doing a job, um, probably a stressful one, because I feel like all work currently in the current climate and economy is stressful. But if you're spending that money you haven't made yet, you're signing yourself up to continue to work at that pace. And really, anything can happen to you in life. You might, like, your circumstances can change, your life direction can change. But if you have all of these liabilities, you're less able to take opportunities when they arrive. And I think it kind of ties you down and limits you in certain ways. And I don't really want to live a life that's limited, if that makes sense.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think that's the point of I don't want to be almost like retire and then look back and think, oh, one, what did I do with my life? But then two, like, oh well, what do I do now then? Because it's almost you've been conditioned to think, you go to university, get a job, you have a family, get a big mortgage, pay that off essentially in time for you to retire, and kind of happy days, you'll then just live out into the sunset. But that just isn't the case. And I think people just do tend to sleepwalk into that situation. And I'd much rather have my eyes wide open with the decisions that we're making. And I think like mortgages are a good example. It's becoming more common now to see 30 or even 35-year mortgages. And it's if you're, if you've been working and say you're 30 or 35, you're taking out, if you're 35 and about to get on the housing ladder, which is probably not uncommon as an age to get on the housing ladder, and then you take out a 35-year mortgage, it's like that thing's going to be gone when you're 70. And assuming, you don't move or downsize or whatever it is in the meantime to get rid of your mortgage, or if you don't overpay it. But I think assuming not for simplicity, you're then, as a 35-year-old, committed to be paying this thing until you're 70. And I think it's very difficult for a 35-year-old to imagine themselves as a 70-year-old. And then to your point, Alex, I think it is really restricting, where you have lots and lots of liabilities. And I think, well, what I'm interested in, my friend he's about to buy a house, and he was chatting to his boss about it, and he was talking about he was going to just do some like kind of basic renovations, get it up and running, and then he's going to live there for X amount, for the foreseeable future, as in his kids will grow up there and leave, and he will like sell it once the kids have left. But his boss is like, "Oh no, you don't worry, you'll get bored, and you'll have to sell it in 5 years anyway, and then you'll get a bigger house, and then you can do the same again in another 5 years." And it was just quite interesting. It was this like you live in this house, which he's paying a lot of money for, and then after 5 years, you then just upscale to another one, then the same again in another five and another five, and all this time you're just pushing the end date back of when you're and theoretically you can carry on working and you do that and you pay it off and you have the big house to show for it. But I think people just kind of sleepwalk into this situation and assume it's the right thing to do. Whereas my friend is very rational. It's like, well, it's got 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, it's nicely set up, and it's in a decent area near schools. Why do I need anything bigger or better? It's perfectly fit for purpose. Um,
That's it. And I think it's the questioning of what is the status
yeah.
quo. Like when you were talking about that, I imagine the boss to be an older person who perhaps has gone through that, buy a starter home, buy a family
Hmm.
home, buy a bigger family home because you need more space to store stuff, etc. And then you might sell it and buy something smaller into retirement and then eventually move somewhere else again. But I really don't see that pattern working out for people like millennials or anyone younger than that. Um, I mean, I've only ever lived in one house. Like the house I'm sitting in now, in the corner of our living room on a homemade desk. I've never lived or owned any other house apart from this one. Um, and I don't. I've thought about moving house to like a bigger place with like a detached house with a driveway and a garage and etc. etc. But then when my wife and I we sit down and we like look at the numbers, we can't make it stack in terms of what sacrifices we would need to make in order to have the benefits. Like we could do that if we both worked non-stop all the time, but if you're doing that, you're not at your house, and it just doesn't make sense to me to continue with that narrative. And I would start to question stuff as to whether those societal norms are actually the right thing to do for like the individual.
Yeah. And I think that questioning the norm is the one thing that's the hardest thing to do because it means you are, and I think we are creatures that like to, we're in the herd and we're in the crowd and we're accepted as part of it, and then that's fine. We don't like to be out of it. But I think for me, that if I always think with pursuing FI, the worst thing that can happen is you've got a nice amount of savings, you've got some your investment portfolio, you've got some discipline, you've analyzed and you know yourself, you can critically evaluate things, and you then just carry on working like everybody else does until they're 65 to claim the state pension. And but you've got all that in the you've got all that backup and you've got options. I always think there's no downside really, apart from sacrificing maybe you know, potentially not driving as nice a car as you could, or not maximizing the house that you live in terms of you could borrow a lot more money from the bank, or going out for more meals, or going on more holidays, or there's certain things that you can that there is a sacrifice, but I think the sacrifice is well worth it when actually the worst case is you just end up like everybody else. The best case is there's no alarm on a Monday morning and you can go hiking up the Cairngorms on one week, or you could go, you know, do nothing another week, learn new books, learn new skills. It's infinite what you could do, and I just would much
Yeah,
rather
there's an
that.
infinite upside,
Yeah,
isn't there? like an infinite upside and not much downside, in my humble opinion. But I think as well, it's like back to kind of Morgan Housel's work, and he said wealth is what you don't see.
Mm.
So when I like today, weirdly, I was kind of in the kitchen making a green tea like in the morning, and for some reason, someone was speaking about retirement and like an old NHS pension where you get a huge lump at 55 and then you just kind of waltz into the sunset. Obviously, that doesn't exist
Mm.
anymore. And someone I can't remember who they were, but someone said I'm at least 10 years away from being able to retire, and they're thinking about it as an age, not as a number. So I just said, actually, like from my point of view, retirement's a number, not an age.
Ah,
And then I
okay.
don't even know if it went in or it sank it or whatever, if they've kind of understood that properly or not. I don't know if they'll ask me any questions about it, but I think it's this trope again of you retire in your 60s, 65, 67. And you see as well people say, when I get to retire, when I'm allowed to retire, like someone needs to give you permission to not work.
Yeah, yeah, I hear that quite a lot as well. I think the yeah, I can retire at, X age or I'm X years from retirement is very much the either I can claim the state pension or there's a workplace thing. But it's like you could be 45 and have all the money that you're ever going to need and still then get your lump sum from your pension at 55, but then be retired in between.
You just need to bridge the gap. Like we call that the ISA bridge.
Yeah, exactly. So that then funds you for 10 years until you crack open your pension pot or whatever. Like, but yeah, people's
Yeah.
mindset is, oh, I'm not allowed. And I think there is I'm sure there is like some psychology there around permissions and almost, like when you're at school, you have to ask permission to do everything or get permission to do things. And at work, you've got a boss and you have permission from your boss to do stuff. And it's almost, we're always waiting for somebody to say, right, yes, little Johnny, you can go and retire now. Um,
Yeah, I agree. You can do it. Therefore, it takes some of the decision risk off of you, I think. And I think the waiting for someone else to agree to something or to give you permission for it, it's your brain's way of reducing perhaps like shame of getting something wrong or the feelings you have around perhaps not making a perfect decision. But nobody makes a perfect decision because nobody can know everything. I think that's why when I first learned about this, I found it such a powerful thing to like I remember where I was sitting exactly, and I know we've talked about it before that I just found like it opened my mind to a whole thing, a concept, a world that I hadn't even thought about. And the way certainly I structure mine and my family's kind of finances is I put money into my ISA, and when I choose to retire, I'll use that ISA money first and then marry that up to a time that I can claim to start taking my private pension, and then after that, I'll start taking the state pension if it exists when we get there. And it's kind of using those to bridge gaps, and with those gaps, like those bridges, that is life. You can do whatever you want within that time, so long as it's attainable for you. You obviously have done the trade offs to have the money there instead of spending it now, and I feel like life is full of trade offs like that, but it's whether you understand that it's possible, really. And one of the biggest things I've learned in life that is these things are possible and you can happen to life. Life doesn't have to happen to you.
yeah, I think I'm a big fan of that saying where like, yeah, you happen to life and life doesn't happen to you. I think you need to be the one to make the moves and be proactive. And I think, if you're listening to this and you're, following the FI path, then you definitely want to happen to life rather than the other way around. And I'd much rather be on the front foot and in control of that.
Yeah. In anything in life, I'd rather be on the front foot.
Yes,
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be
absolutely.
caught on the
Yeah.
back foot in anything at all. I mean, some other kind of reasoning as to why I think people are starting to wake up to stuff like this is because if you think about like Alex, you and I, we're like mid 30s, right? So over the last 20 years, um, the levels of kind of depression, anxiety, and stress have almost like doubled over that time frame over the last 20 years. And this is kind of research that's come from, let me just check quickly because I've got so many tabs open here. The School for Public Health Research. So changes in depression, anxiety, and stress over 2 decades. So from it's done in 2023. So it's kind of gauging the levels of that between 2003 and 2023. And really, all of those things point upwards. And it got me wondering today, like, why does that happen? Um, and they're known, those three things, depression, anxiety, and stress, are known as common mental health disorders. And they account, according to this paper, for 12.5% of sick leave in the UK, which actually, if you think about that from gross domestic product, it's a humongous cost to the UK government and our output as a country. And it kind of made me think about why those things happen. So if you think about that time frame, 2003 to 2023, off the top of my head, right, and Alex had some more stuff if you think of it as we go, we've had a huge housing crisis in 2008. We've had in 2012, the student loan fees tripled at that point. The average house price in 2023, no, sorry, 2003 was £127,000. And now, 2024, it's 265,000. So it's gone up 95% in that time frame. I mean, my maths is not perfectly accurate here, but that's an awful lot. And if you think about average wage growth in the UK, it's 3.37%, which is nowhere near catching you up to be able to buy a house. And in the UK, we have this thing of you need to buy a house, or you just haven't achieved one of these huge milestones in life. When actually, the truth is you don't have to do that. And on top of that, we've had a humongous inflation spike from 2021, which we're still feeling the ramifications of. So if you take all of that into account, I'm really not surprised the financial independence movement is kind of lifting off and a lot more people are being actively engaged with it, because that's a lot of economic and financial stuff to happen in a 20-year span, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think there's obviously COVID as well, where I think people's
Yeah,
relationship
forgot
to
that.
work, yeah, I think the relationship with work definitely changed from being, going from in the office to being at home for 2 years, basically. I think
Mm,
people reevaluated what they wanted, and none of it was, oh, I'd love to work more. And
absolutely.
and so I
How did
think,
I forget that? I
yeah,
literally worked in a hospital, gowned for
yeah,
months and months and months through COVID. And I think people have started to question stuff at that point, haven't they? Once they've been enrolled in that kind of, not enrolled, but enthralled in that kind of quick changes.
yeah,
And then people start to worry because they're not getting their normal salary in and they get paid, 80% of it or something like that if you're not actively working. And that really is a huge kind of hammer that hits home what what could have been a major problem for people. So I think a lot of people start to question it. You're right.
yeah. I think it's, yeah, I there's some really good examples you gave, and I think, yeah, it probably is leading to a definite rise in those issues.
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, like imagine if you graduate into 2008, you just don't find a job, particularly anywhere. The economy is kind of not functioning the way you expected it to function, and it's that nobody really predicted something like that. Similar to COVID, if you even take the UK student nursing population now, there are thousands of thousands of UK nurses graduating last year, this year, the year before, and because there's loads of staff shortages within the NHS, but there's recruitment freezes because the budget issues, people aren't finding jobs. So when you're told, like I was told, nursing's a job for life, you'll never struggle to find a job. When I did my training 2016 to 2019, I was offered 4 jobs as I was going through as a student, not even qualified. And now people are being qualified for 6 to 12 months and they can't find a job at all.
Yeah, I think that's another, yeah, it's another, almost what used to be the safe professions potentially aren't as safe anymore. Um,
Mm.
and not to
Yeah, no,
mention
I
the,
agree.
the
I wouldn't
student.
want to be them at all.
No, I'm very happy that I'm kind of at this position now,
Mm.
rather than
And it's luck, isn't it?
graduating into it. Yeah, it was my parents,
Yeah,
yeah, doing what they did 35 years ago. That meant I graduated when
exactly.
I did. I do, yeah, I graduated in 2012, so It was still
Hmm.
fairly tough. But yeah, I mean, from the it wasn't as bad obviously as going into the financial crisis. But yeah,
Still not an easy environment to find a job in or to work in for sure. It's yeah, difficult. Okay, do you think we need to do anything more on
no,
the kind of why we've chosen the path, or do you think that's
I think
enough?
that's probably enough. I'd love to hear from listeners as well if they've had similar encounters or issues, or if you feel we've missed anything, please let us know.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So feedback, like the feedback we get, is really valuable, and that's partly some of the reason why we do like intro, main body, a quick game of reasonable or ridiculous, and a summary. So we now have taken that on board from some comments we got. So that's actually really helpful, and I think it makes it all round a better episode for people to listen to. So yeah, any thoughts that you have, send them to us, and we'll take them on board. If you have anything burning you want to come on and talk to us about, we're more than happy to do that as well. We'll accommodate it too. You can send us an email at nursingyourwaytowealth@gmail.com. But for now, let's do a quick game of reasonable or ridiculous. And this, Alex, is stemmed by an advert I saw late last week, and I thought I would bring it to you. So you know those car lotteries, right, where you buy a ticket for a couple of pounds, and if your ticket's selected, you either get to keep whatever car they want to shift, or you get a cash kind of pot of money. So, say for example, not that you ever would, you buy some tickets, you spend 30 quid on tickets or whatever, and you win, and someone turns up with the car, and they say to you like, I think the advert was for like an Audi R8 or something like that. I don't know. And they say to you, Alex, would you like this Audi R8 and £10,000 in cash, or would you like £70,000 just in cash and we'll keep the car? What would you pick?
My initial reaction is the cash, um, because I wouldn't keep the car, so I'd only look to sell the car, and then I guess it would become a second-hand car. So I don't know how much I mean, I don't know if it'd affect it that much, but I'd have to look and see what value I would get for that car. I'd probably use something like We Buy Any Car. They'll give you the absolute base bottom price that you're ever going to get for a car, and then look at that plus the
Mm-hmm.
cash. Because all I would do is sell the car because I don't really have a. It'd be cool to keep. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't. But I often find, like, imagine because I do see some of these adverts, and you see some of the people that win it, and you think you've got some chap that lives in like probably lives in a flat and is going to get a 300 grand Lamborghini, like so you're going to park it in like so
Mm.
or like park it on the street somewhere.
Where do you keep
Insuring
it?
that thing is going to be mad. Like the cost of servicing and running it, I think you have to be quite well off to run a car like that. Because your insurance, I reckon, is easily
Yeah,
going to be 5, 6, 7, 8 grand. Plus, then servicing a
yeah,
car that you then have to go to Lamborghini to service it, or so I think I wouldn't want that to have earlier. I don't think I'd want that stress and liability. So I'd either look to. It depends on how much the car's worth, but my gut reaction would be to just
mm.
have the cash. How about you?
Yeah. I think I'd be the same. It removes a lot of decision fatigue and kind of, I think, stress. But part of me wants to kind of drive the car for a month and get it out
Mm,
of my system. But then I think I'd feel quite relieved to sell it. So I thought a bit more about it. What I think I would do is I would take the cash and then I would do some kind of supercar experience with some of that money just to get that itch out of my system.
yes, that's a good idea.
Because you need deep pockets to run something like that, don't you? When like a single tire costs you like, I don't
It's
know,
exactly
400 quid or
yeah,
more.
and I think yeah, that's exactly right. Even just like filling it up with fuel and all this stuff, it'd be like 300, 400
Yeah,
quid of fuel to fill up a Lambo. Yeah, I agree. I, don't,
yeah. And you have to go really often.
I feel um, yes, I would be. There's a chap that lives near me and he's got a Lamborghini and he drives it around, and the road is just full of potholes, and he's got to go really slowly over
Mm.
them. So I don't. The car sounds lovely and it looks cool, but yeah, I I'm they're not for me. Not right now. Maybe when I'm older, I could. Yeah, but I think there's.
Yeah, you do hear of those people who get like a humongous tax-free lump sum out of their pension, don't you? And they buy a supercar and they're like Lamborghini pensioners or whatever.
Mm,
But I don't think I'd want it when I'm that age either. Like, I think the time to have something like that is 25,
mm,
not 65.
yeah.
Okay, so we'll do a quick summary. So we've talked about really Alex and I's reasoning for kind of being on this path, and hopefully some of it resonates or not. If it does, let us know. If it doesn't, also let us know. We gave you a quick summary of the Paul Piff experiment, the Monopoly study, where rich people tend to attribute their success to skill rather than luck, especially in the early years. We've talked a little bit about why we choose to do what we do. We'd prefer to trade our money for time rather than the other way around. We would think a lot about stress relief in terms of how it impacts your thinking and your body. We have more control or ownership over your time, and really questioning the status quo for things. So, if I always think this is something that you get taught at university, is to question stuff, is to read things and think about why somebody's put something there or why somebody's written it that way. What angle are they coming from? And to think whether what works for many people, whether that would work for you and your individual circumstances, and to really understand that you can happen to life, right? Instead of life just happening to you. And we don't want people to sleepwalk into retirement and be like, oh, my life's gone. I finished my mortgage and I own my house or whatever, but I can't get the last 40 years of my life back. So a part of this kind of process and project for us is to open people's eyes to what's possible out of life instead of just sleepwalking into it and just accepting the status quo for what it is. And really, I think ultimately it gives us peace from our own mind as well, which we've mentioned before. So we can live a fulfilled life. We can get to retirement and look back and think, actually, I had a good time, did some good stuff, and I don't have many or any regrets. And the last thing in the summary is both Alex and I would pick the money over the car if we won one of those car lotteries. If you think differently and you think owning a supercar is the right way to go and you want to talk to us about it, do so as well. But Alex, my friend, thank you for your time. We'll reconvene next week. But is there anything else you'd like to add or no?
No, that's everything. Thank you very much.
Cool. All right, my friend, thanks a lot. I'll speak to you next time. None of what we discuss on the show is to be considered financial or health advice, and we recommend you always do your own research or consult an independent financial advisor or a doctor when making your financial or health decisions.